Good morning, everybody. How are you? Take some deep breaths and get a little grounded. So, I'd like to chat today a little bit about what self-exploration is. Maybe let's start with the word exploration. So exploration is going into a place or something that you've never experienced before or never had any depth with, and going into get an experience of it, get an awareness of it, get so you're comfortable with it. So you could go to the mountains and explore a new hiking path up the side of the mountain, and on that hiking path you might find some rock slides or something where you can't get across and the trail's blocked, or you might find a bear that scares you and sends you going back down. It has a huge amount of unknown in it. And now when that comes to ourself, how does that apply? So let me frame something for you. So we as children, up until about the age 7 or 8, basically take on understanding of, or awareness or beliefs or societal rules, etc. We take that on completely and absolutely. We just assume everything our parents say is correct. As a child, it goes straight into us, becomes part of our subconscious, part of our memory. It's key in childhood development, because how could you learn to walk? How could you learn what's safe, what's red, what's blue, what's green, what all these different things mean? So basically, we get painted with the experience and knowledge of our parents, which is great because that sets the framework for a lot of things. But to also be aware now as adults that our parents had a lot of societal conditioning built into them. They had wounds and trauma from their past. They had an epigenetic lineage trauma that is basically trauma that's carried down from our parents. So something like being afraid of authority, or being afraid of running out of money or death or something like that would be programmed inherently in everything we're taught from our parents if they had that. And then we'd pass that on to our children, because it's part of our love and trying to protect our children and to make them safe is to give them an indication of what's safe from our parents. We pass down to our kids, right? So it's really important, because we wouldn't survive without it. There's a certain things like that are built into our programming, like the mammalian dive response. When your face hits cold water, you'll stop breathing, and you can watch babies and they'll actually start to try and swim, which is programmed into their system because they haven't actually been taught anything. So these are all in our genetics. So at the same time, we're carrying a bunch of genetic trauma and predispositions from our parents. So now as adults, we now are discerning for ourselves. We're setting what our boundaries are, our rules are, we're stating what possibilities are in our universe, etc. But until we start the process of self-exploration, we're not going to know where we're limited by some of those past things from our parents, from our programming, from the lineage trauma, etc. So self-exploration is a process that we should do our whole lives. But it's kind of programmed out of us societally. Going to our edges, exploring trauma, wounds, things that feel uncomfortable is societally kind of taught that it's scary or verboten or just not a good place to go, because it scares people, because they have those same edges and darknesses and unawarenesses hidden inside themselves. But as we choose the journey to awaken, we have to begin a journey of self-exploration. We have to go and have experiences that give us the ability to discern and let's call a discernment. It's like, okay, I'm on a path and I'm going to go left or right. Well, this path is, am I going to go into a marriage or am I not going to go into a marriage? Do I want to be committed to a person for the rest of my life, or do I want to keep searching or be single for the rest of my life? That discernment, you'll make choices in, and that's the whole human experience. So, okay, I chose to have a marriage, and then I went into marriage, and there was a whole bunch of societal conditioning and beliefs and expectations and obligations that go with the term marriage, and to commit yourself to another person. Often these things aren't even said or spoken of, but they're just things we grew up with and we saw our mom and dad do, or our grandparents do, or whatever. So we feel that we have to kind of align with what we saw. Well, if our partner maybe is from another culture, my ex-wife was Japanese, and I found out through the course of our marriage that the expectations and obligations of marriage in the two cultures were quite different. And it created a bunch of misunderstandings, frustrations, resentments, etc., that would go on, because it's like, oh, you're not living up to the expectation. But after my marriage was over, I realized that, okay, in that culture, those things are different. Like, love isn't actually expressed in Japanese in the same way that it is in Western culture. Outward signs of affection are very not really allowed, or kind of taboo, like kissing a person in the open or holding hands or whatever, which was my love language, but it was like something that made her feel uncomfortable because she was not indoctrinated in that culture. So it created love language issues, if you've studied love language issues. And her expectations of love was a man bringing the money home and doing the chores and doing things that kept the house in order and that kind of thing. And I didn't see that as love. So when you have these kind of crazy things, you start to find out, and then the universe also sends you experiences like marriage, for example. And then after, because we couldn't clarify those things during the course of our marriage, we ended up finding out all these things afterwards. And it was a gift in some ways, but it also kind of nasty that a divorce happened, because all those things came apart. But it created this huge self-awareness inside of me around what kind of love was important to me and what I needed to feel loved and how I love other people, and to have discussions about how you feel loved, etc. So the journey of self-exploration becomes these series of events that that occur in your life. You can also have traumatic things like, okay, let's say if you have a car accident, or you're mugged in a back alley, or other things. These may look like, okay, I was a victim of things, but we're also exploring ourselves. Okay, how do I handle fear? Do I have a self-defense mechanism? How can I deal with something like that when it happens? Can I move my emotions efficiently, or do I block them up? And do they get in my body and cause disease and discomfort? So you have these events, and then you go into them and you maybe suffer from them because you don't feel like you have any control. And then you get small, and then you don't go out, and you don't feel safe to go out in society. Well, where did all those come from, and why did you let those kind of build and fester? Once we start seeing our life as this smorgasbord of events that start to open us to our whys, and our whys are really important. You get to the bottom of it, and you'll figure out that you're isolated from society and you don't feel safe or whatever, and you'll get to the whys, and then eventually you'll find out, okay, well, it was from that trauma. I'm not going out anymore because I'm still suffering from that wound of feeling all those emotions and the fear and the anger, etc. And then once you can go there and look at it and express those wounds and those emotions and stuff like this, then all of a sudden that piece of armor that said, I'm not going out anymore, all of a sudden you can say, okay, I'm going out again, but now I'm going to have boundaries. I'm not going to go in back dark alleys. I'm going to go out with friends. I'm not going to walk late at night all by myself. Those are safer, more flexible boundaries that you've now created, and now you open yourself. So instead, a lot of what society teaches us and our parents in their protection and safety when we were young, it closes this cage around us. Or we also have things like religion and governmental rules. Religion says, okay, no sex before marriage. You have to commit to a person for the rest of your life. You can't sin. You can't swear. You can't whatever. And it puts this cage around us. And then all of a sudden it's like when we want to express our anger or something and I can't say F you or whatever, all of a sudden I feel constrained and then I get angry because I'm not being free to do what my body and my mind or my needs are in that moment. So with self-exploration, we're going up to the edge and we're kind of scratching at the wall and seeing if that's really a wall or that's something that needs to be there. And you'll go up to something and say, okay, I'm going to do that. Like as a child, it's like, okay, I'm going to go touch that red shiny thing on the top of the stove or whatever, and you'll touch it and the fingers are burned, and then you're like, I'm not going to do that again. Now that's something a learned experience by direct experience, but how many learned experiences, maybe you never did touch that stove burner, but your mother went up and she slapped your hand the minute you went up close to the burner and you got a similar thing that didn't burn your finger, but you're not going to surely go touch that red burner again. If we start looking at so many events, our jobs, like somebody that wants to control us will do something like that, a boss or whatever, and they'll make you feel like shit or whatever, that you didn't do well in a situation, and then you'll constantly be trying to please that boss, and that boss will be fed by your aversion to conflict or aversion to authority. How much is that keeping you small and keeping you unhappy? Because now you can't speak back to your boss and say, holy cow, I'm taking the weekend off. I've always had my weekends off, and why the hell are you saying I can't or whatever? Well, that boss is like, oh, I'm going to fire you, and what kind of employee are you? And you want a promotion or whatever. They're using all these things to coerce you and your conditioning from your parents to control you and to make their life easier and solve problems for themselves, but at your detriment. So all of a sudden you start looking at these experiences and you start to see that, okay, this is giving me a recognition of my parents saying I couldn't speak up or my voice wasn't important. And then we have this like existential where it's not safe for us to exist and the universe doesn't have to feed me or doesn't have to align with me. And then we end up just pulling in more and more situations where we keep getting tested to see if that's really true, which it isn't. But every fact that you've been given up until this point in your life was. So without self-exploration, we can't find where we've been controlled, where we've been misaligned, or lied to, or coerced. And each time you find out the spaces where you've been coerced, you expand. You start to understand and realize that you're much bigger than you've allowed to been, and that your light is compressed, and maybe you're not feeling safe and even just living. So the self-exploration process is so key. So when you feel bad or you feel uncomfortable, start asking a why. Why do I feel that? Where did this come from? Where's the root? Just ask that in your head. You don't even have to say it out loud, but this awareness starts to flood in, because there's so much that we've been told as truth that's not actually truth. And we have so much that's built on other people's experiences, our parents' past, all this kind of stuff that you haven't really actually had the chance to explore. Another good example is things like gossip. I know when I got divorced, my wife's friends or the female friends that we had were living vicariously through her. They were telling her all these things that I was going to do to her and how I was going to clean out the bank accounts and all this kind of stuff, because they were living through that experience. They weren't having it, but they were terrified of it, so they were projecting all their fears through her. And I wasn't even dealing with my wife in those situations with the fears and stuff. Everything was so uncomfortable and weird, when I had no intention of doing any of that stuff. If anything, I gave her everything, and I started fresh because I was scared that that I would hurt her or the kids or other things. So we also live through like gossip and other people's experience. We listen and hear them, but because we haven't experienced that thing ourselves, we build understandings based on other people's experience. And that can be great, but it can also limit us hugely because you don't have the same beliefs, you don't have the same past history, etc., that they have. So all I'm saying, I don't want to beleaguer this, is that we don't know what's stuck or has been a lie or has been a mistruth or is built on parental expectations or lineage trauma or other things. So we need to go in and have real experiences where we go to the depth and start to ask why, because we don't know where we're limited. We don't know what's keeping us small. We don't know what subconscious programming is making choices not even available that are actually there. And without going and spelunking and seeing how that feels in the body, we don't have the tools to be able to climb out or correct the misprogramming. And all we're doing is reprogramming ourselves. Okay, that's the truth in my reality, or that was a truth at this time and place. But also remember, every time you update your programming, you're a new person. So truths and what's real and what can be expected have to be tested on a regular basis, because you're going to find out new possibilities as soon as it's like, okay, I love myself now, or I'm allowed to be safe in this world and exist. Once all those programmings change to allow those things, all of a sudden it's like, oh, what I want matters, and abundance comes to me, and all the things that I love show up. But if you're not allowed to exist and you're shameful or whatever, you get trapped, and then you're stuck in a hole. So start exploration everywhere you can. And if you need help with this, just put some notes in the bottom or whatever, but really just ask why. Why am I mad? Why do I feel small? Why do I feel frustrated? Why is this happening? And you might not get the answer right away, but once you've given the opening to the why, the answers will come. It's just sometimes we don't want to hear them. Sometimes they're buried under 3 or 4 different layers of other stuff. But as you unearth the layers, the whys will come for each step. And once you understand your whys, it gets much simpler. So get down and know your whys. And especially when you're not feeling comfortable, when you're feeling unhappy, when you're feeling frustrated, those whys are going to be really key to opening your possibility. And it's going to get you to new truth, and it's going to get you to a level of happiness that you've never had before. So go explore, go self-explore, go down there, go feel all the icky stuff, go bathe in your own shadow and crap. But I'm going to tell you right here and now, that's the fertilizer that's going to grow a beautiful you. And if you don't feel safe going there, it's going to be guaranteed that there's something there that you need to understand, because our ego protects us and it tries to hide us from things that are going to give us truth and our power back. And self-exploration is going to get us there. We're going to understand what feels really right and really wrong in our body, where right now we're kind of muddled. So go self-explore. Put some stuff back in the comments on what you found, and you're going to be amazed. It's going to change you in the most beautiful ways. So thank you for listening. Have a great day, and we'll talk again soon. I love you all.